3 years ago, my father called me a disgrace and shut the door on his pregnant daughter. I walked away with 2 suitcases and built a life they never thought possible. A career. A home. A beautiful daughter. I never expected to see them again. Until today. Standing on my porch. Homeless. Broke. Desperate. "Claire, please," my mother whispers, "we have nowhere else to go." How quickly the mighty fall. How strange to hold the power they once wielded against me. The question isn't whether I'll help them. It's whether they'll recognize the woman I've become without them. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow's special episode is one you definitely don't want to miss. The grandfather clock in the dining room ticked like a time bomb. Mom's roast chicken sat half-eaten on fine china plates that had been in our family for generations. I stared at the crystal water glasses, watching condensation slide down the sides like tears. It was now or never. "I have something to tell you all," I said, my voice barely audible over Dad's discussion of the church fundraiser. The conversation halted. 3 pairs of eyes turned toward me. My father William set down his fork with deliberate care, while my mother Marion's smile froze in place. My older sister Charlotte, ever perfect, merely raised an eyebrow. "I'm pregnant." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the clock seemed to hold its breath. Then my father's face turned a deep shade of crimson. "Who?" he demanded, his voice tight with fury. "Derek," I answered, twisting my napkin beneath the table. "We were together at college. He's in London now, for that finance internship." "Did you tell him?" Mom asked, her voice unnaturally high. "Yes. He offered money, but..." I swallowed hard. "He's not coming back." Dad pushed his chair back from the table, the leg scraping against hardwood. "There are ways to fix this, Claire. You're only 21. Your whole life is ahead of you." I placed a protective hand over my still flat stomach. "I'm not fixing anything. I'm keeping my baby." "Then you're not staying in this house." His voice was cold, final. "William," Mom whispered, but there was no real protest in her voice. "You have a choice," Dad continued. "Make the right one, or pack your things." I stood up, napkin falling to the floor. "Then I guess I'm leaving." As I headed for the stairs, Charlotte caught up to me in the hallway. For a moment, hope flickered. Maybe my sister, only 2 years older but always wiser in our parents' eyes, would stand by me. "You've always done this," she hissed instead, grabbing my arm. "Created drama, sought attention. Now you're an embarrassment to all of us." Her perfect features contorted with something beyond anger, resentment. "I've spent my entire life doing everything right while you got away with everything because you were the baby of the family. And now you pull this?" I yanked my arm away. "I thought at least you would understand." "Understand what?" "That you were irresponsible? That you're going to drag our family name through the mud in this town?" Charlotte shook her head. "You made your bed, Claire. Now lie in it." 3 hours later, I was throwing clothes into suitcases. My childhood bedroom, with its pale blue walls and window seat overlooking the garden, would no longer be my sanctuary. As I reached for photo albums on the bookshelf, a loose photograph fluttered to the ground. I picked it up, our family at Charlotte's graduation. My face had been carefully cut out with scissors. The discovery sent me reeling. This wasn't a spontaneous reaction, they'd been mentally cutting me out of the family for some time, just waiting for a reason. My hands trembled as I checked other photos. More faces removed. More evidence erased. "Your time's up," Dad called from the hallway. "There's a cab waiting." I was escorted down the stairs like a criminal, Mom hovering in the background, eyes red but silent. Dad handed me $200 in cash. "This is all you get," he said. "Don't come asking for more." The cab driver watched uncomfortably as I stood on the curb, 2 suitcases at my feet, trying not to cry. As we pulled away, I didn't look back at the Victorian house that had been my home for 21 years. "Where to, miss?" the driver asked gently. I gave him Megan Wilson's address, my friend since kindergarten. When I arrived at her tiny one-bedroom apartment, she took one look at my face and pulled me into a hug. "They threw me out," I sobbed against her shoulder. "Then you'll stay here," she said simply, helping me with my bags. "For as long as you need." That night, curled up on Megan's pull-out couch, I stared at the unfamiliar ceiling. My phone remained silent, no calls, no texts from my family asking if I was safe. A week later, I gathered my courage and called home, hoping the initial shock had worn off. Dad answered on the fourth ring. "Dad, it's me," I said, heart pounding. I wanted to talk. "You are no longer our daughter," he interrupted, voice devoid of emotion. "We've removed you from our will and accounts. Don't call this number again." The line went dead. The next day brought another blow. At my first prenatal appointment, the doctor's face grew serious as she studied the ultrasound. "There are some complications we need to monitor," she explained. "Your blood pressure is concerning, and there's an issue with the placenta placement. This will be a high-risk pregnancy." In the clinic bathroom, I broke down completely. Without health insurance, without family support, how would I manage? The sterile white walls seemed to close in around me as panic overwhelmed me. That same week, I ran into Mrs. Peterson from our church at the grocery store. She quickly averted her eyes and turned her cart down another aisle. Later, I overheard her on the phone. "Yes, I saw Claire Harper." "No, I didn't speak to her. Marion told everyone she moved away for a job opportunity." Imagine my surprise seeing her here, clearly pregnant. The narrative had already been written. I was erased, replaced with a convenient lie to preserve the family's standing in our small Vermont town. 3 days later, a small envelope appeared under Megan's door. Inside was $5,000 in cash and a note. "Your grandmother would have wanted you to have this. Stay strong." It was signed by Mrs. Caldwell, my late grandmother's best friend. The following Sunday, I sat alone on a park bench watching families enjoy the autumn afternoon. Children kicked through piles of red and gold leaves while parents looked on with pride. An ache spread through my chest, but alongside it came resolve. "We'll be okay," I whispered to my unborn child. "I promise we'll build something beautiful, so beautiful that one day, they'll regret throwing us away." That evening, I applied for a job in Boston. 3 hours away from my hometown. Far enough to start fresh. Far enough to become someone new. The marketing firm's office hummed with activity as I submitted my final draft for the pet food campaign. 3 years had transformed me from a desperate, pregnant girl sleeping on a friend's couch to a respected junior marketing executive with a small but growing reputation. My tiny studio apartment now housed not only me but my vibrant 2-year-old daughter, Emma. "Mama, look." Emma held up a finger painting of blue and yellow swirls, her blonde curls bouncing with excitement. She sat at the small table I'd set up in the corner of my office, a necessity on days when childcare fell through. "That's beautiful, sweetheart," I smiled, saving my work before pushing back from my desk. "Is it the ocean?" "It's the sky," she corrected with the confidence only toddlers possess. A knock at my door interrupted our moment. Vivian Pearson, my boss, stood in the doorway, eyebrow raised at the sight of Emma. My stomach dropped. "I'm so sorry, Vivian. The daycare called. Emma had a slight fever, and I couldn't find a sitter on such short notice. I finished the Possum Pet Foods copy, and I was just about to." Vivian waved away my explanation, her gaze softening as she looked at Emma. "Is this the little artist you're always talking about?" Relief washed over me as Vivian crouched down to admire Emma's painting. Later, after Emma had fallen asleep on the office couch, Vivian pulled me aside. "Claire, I've been watching you juggle everything. It's impressive, but unsustainable." My heart sank, expecting termination. Instead, she continued, "I'm implementing a flexible schedule option for parents, starting with you. Core hours in office, the rest remote." Tears pricked my eyes. "Why would you do this for me?" Because talent like yours shouldn't be lost because the system makes it impossible for single parents. Vivian's eyes held understanding beyond professional interest. I was raised by a single mother. I know the struggle. That conversation marked a turning point. With a more manageable schedule, I could attend Emma's doctor appointments without panic, work from home when she had sniffles, and still exceed my professional targets. The next significant change came through a community center flyer, single parents support group, childcare provided. Desperate for adult conversation that didn't revolve around marketing metrics, I attended. First time? Asked a tall man with kind eyes, bouncing a boy about Emma's age on his knee. Is it that obvious? I laughed nervously. Only because we all had that same deer-in-headlights look at our first meeting, offered a woman with a sleepy infant strapped to her chest. I'm Jasmine, and this is Lily. Marcus, the man introduced himself. And this little tornado is Sam. My wife died during childbirth. I'm Claire. My family disowned me when I got pregnant. The words tumbled out before I could stop them, but instead of awkward silence, I received understanding nods. Well, you've got a new family now, Jasmine said simply. She wasn't exaggerating. Within months, we'd established a rotating childcare schedule. Sunday dinners became sacred, my small apartment filling with laughter as Sam chased Emma around the coffee table, while we adults traded parenting hacks and job leads. At work, I was thriving. When our biggest client threatened to leave after a competitor's aggressive pitch, I stayed late developing a counterproposal centered on emerging social media platforms. This is innovative, Vivian said, flipping through my presentation. Risky, but exactly what they need. The client not only stayed but doubled their budget. My inbox filled with congratulatory messages, including one from the company's CEO. Impressive work from such a young team member. Keep an eye on this one, Vivian. The day I made the final payment on my mountain of medical debt, I treated myself to a pair of pearl earrings from a jewelry store window I'd passed daily for years. Special occasion? Asked the saleswoman. I touched the smooth pearls in their velvet box. My mother always said I'd get her pearls on my wedding day. These are better, I earned them myself. That evening, Emma and I celebrated with ice cream sundaes at our kitchen table. As chocolate sauce dripped down her chin, she looked up with her father's blue eyes and said clearly, I love you, Mama. For simple words that healed something broken inside me. Later, scrolling through photos of Emma's brief life, her first smile, first steps, first day at daycare, I felt the absence of my family like a physical pain. They had missed so much. A part of me still wanted to share her with them, while another part wanted to protect her from people who could discard her so easily. The collision of past and present came unexpectedly in a department store. Shopping for Emma's birthday presents, I turned down the toy aisle and nearly collided with Aunt Susan. For a moment, she didn't recognize me. Then Emma called out, Mommy, can I have this doll? Aunt Susan's face drained of color. Claire? Before I could respond, she hurried away, disappearing among the clothing racks. That evening, my phone chimed with a text from a number I hadn't seen in 3 years. Charlotte, I saw you have a daughter now. I stared at those 7 words for hours, fingers hovering over the keyboard. In the end, I simply turned off my phone without replying. 2 months later, I signed mortgage papers for a small townhouse in a good school district. The loan officer glanced at my age on the application. 24? That's impressive. Most buyers your age have family help with the down payment. I've had help, I smiled. Just not the kind you're thinking of. Our first Thanksgiving in our new home felt like a milestone. Marcus brought his famous green bean casserole, Jasmine arrived with pumpkin pies, and their children filled the house with noise and joy. Setting the table, I caught myself arranging the napkins in perfect triangles, exactly as my mother had insisted upon at every holiday meal. The realization made me pause, knife and fork in hand. Despite everything, I'd carried pieces of my family forward into this new life. After dinner, while the children played and the others chatted in the living room, my phone rang with an unknown number. Is this Claire Harper? Asked a woman's professional voice. Yes, this is Claire. I'm calling from Reynolds and Watson Agency. We've been following your work at Anderson Marketing, particularly the Possum campaign. We'd like to discuss a senior position with our firm. The salary she mentioned was double my current earnings. When I asked why they'd chosen me, her answer caught me off guard. Vivian Pearson reached out to us. She said you had, and I quote, a uniquely resilient background story that translates to innovative thinking. She thought you might be ready for bigger challenges. I accepted the offer the following day, knowing what it meant for Emma's future, a college fund, financial security, opportunities I'd never had. As I tucked her into bed that night, I whispered, "We did it, baby girl. We really did it." The spring rain tapped gently against the kitchen windows as Emma and I shaped cookie dough into stars and hearts. At 5, she insisted on doing everything herself, tiny fingers pressing cookie cutters with fierce concentration. "Can we make one for Mr. Whiskers?" she asked, referring to the stray cat that frequented our back porch. "I don't think cats like sugar cookies, sweetie," I laughed, wiping flour from her cheek. The doorbell rang, an unexpected sound on a dreary Sunday morning. Probably Marcus, I thought, who sometimes dropped by with Sam for impromptu playdates. "Coming," I called, wiping my hands on a dish towel. When I pulled open the front door, time seemed to stop. Standing on my porch, rain dripping from their coats, were my parents and Charlotte. Dad, once imposing in his 6-foot frame, looked diminished somehow, shoulders hunched against more than just the weather. Mom's carefully maintained appearance had slipped, her hair showing gray roots, her clothes slightly rumpled. Charlotte stood slightly apart, her eyes downcast. "Claire," my father said, his voice lacking the authoritative tone I remembered. "May we come in?" Shock kept me frozen in the doorway. 3 years of silence, and now they appeared without warning on my threshold. I found my voice. "Why are you here?" Charlotte stepped forward. "We need your help." I almost laughed at the irony. "My help? That's rich." "Please," my mother whispered, eyes darting past me into the warmth of the home I'd built without them. "Just 5 minutes." Against my better judgment, I stepped aside. They filed in, leaving puddles on my entryway floor. I directed them to the living room, aware of the photographs of Emma lining the hallway, evidence of all they'd missed. "Wait here," I said coolly, returning to the kitchen where Emma was about to sample raw cookie dough. "Who's at the door, Mama?" she asked. "Some people I used to know," I answered, heart pounding. "Keep decorating, okay? I'll be right back." In the living room, my family sat perched awkwardly on the edge of my sofa. My father cleared his throat. "You have a nice home." "Thank you," I replied, not sitting. "Now explain why you're here after 3 years of silence." Charlotte's composure cracked first. "Martin's been arrested," she blurted out, referring to her husband of 2 years. "Embezzlement and fraud. The authorities think he's been stealing from clients for years." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, genuinely surprised. Martin had always seemed the model of propriety, the perfect match for my perfect sister. "It's worse than that," Dad continued, voice hollow. "The family business is implicated. They think Martin was laundering money through our accounts. Everything's frozen, bank accounts, assets, the house." Mom dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. "The scandal is everywhere. People we've known for decades won't even speak to us now." The parallels were not lost on me. Cast out by the community, nowhere to go, finances in ruins, exactly where I had been 3 years ago, pregnant and alone. "What does this have to do with me?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "We need a place to stay," Dad said, the words clearly difficult for him. "Just until we can get back on our feet. We've lost the house. Everything." Before I could respond, a small voice came from the doorway. "Mama, the cookies are ready for the oven." 3 heads turned simultaneously to see Emma, flour dusting her blonde curls, cookie dough still on her fingers. My mother gasped softly, hand flying to her mouth. "Who are they?" Emma asked, eyeing the strangers with curiosity. I moved to her side protectively. These are people I used to know, I repeated, placing my hands on her shoulders. This is Mr. and Mrs. Harper, and this is Charlotte. You have the same last name as us, Emma observed with a child's directness. Yes, Charlotte replied softly. We do. Emma, innocent and kind-hearted, stepped forward with a smile. Would you like a cookie? We made stars and hearts and moons. My mother reached out instinctively, then dropped her hand when she caught my warning glance. We would love a cookie, she said, voice trembling. I sent Emma back to the kitchen, promising to join her in a moment. Once she was out of earshot, I turned back to my family. Let me be clear, I said quietly. That little girl has never known rejection or abandonment. She doesn't know that her grandparents threw her mother out for being pregnant with her. She doesn't know that her aunt stood by and watched it happen. My father flinched at my words. Good, I thought. Let him feel something. Claire, my mother began, we were wrong. So wrong. If we could go back. But you can't, I interrupted. You can't undo what you did. Hours later, after Emma was in bed, I sat across from my family at my kitchen table. The cookies Emma had insisted they take sat untouched on a plate between us, a sweet offering from a child who knew nothing of our bitter history. 2 weeks, I finally said. You can stay in the guest room for 2 weeks while you figure something out. Relief washed over their faces, though Charlotte looked skeptical. That's it? With conditions, I continued. You will respect my parenting decisions. You will contribute to household chores and expenses as much as possible. And we will not discuss the past in front of Emma. Thank you, my father said, a phrase I couldn't remember ever hearing from him before. We won't forget this. As they settled into the guest room that night, I stood in Emma's doorway, watching her sleep peacefully. The irony wasn't lost on me, I was now sheltering the very people who had refused to shelter me. But I wasn't doing it for them. I was doing it for Emma, who deserved to form her own opinions about her family. And perhaps, a small voice whispered, I was doing it for myself, to prove I was nothing like them, that I would never turn away someone in need, even those who had hurt me most. The next morning, I woke to the smell of coffee brewing. In my kitchen stood my mother, awkwardly searching cabinets for mugs. Second cabinet on the right, I said, startling her. I hope you don't mind, she said, pouring a cup and offering it to me. I thought it was the least I could do. I accepted the coffee, our fingers briefly touching during the exchange. A simple gesture, loaded with 3 years of absence. Claire, she began hesitantly. Your daughter is beautiful. I took a sip of coffee to hide my emotion. Yes, I agreed. She is. Our uneasy truce lasted exactly 8 days. I returned from work to find my mother had reorganized my kitchen cabinets. Pots and pans stacked in different formations, spices alphabetized, coffee mugs arranged by color instead of my practical system of daily use items within easy reach. I hope you don't mind, she said, wiping her hands on a dish towel. It's much more efficient this way. I bit my tongue, reminding myself that temporary discomfort was preferable to throwing my family out into the street, the way they had done to me. But the small intrusions continued. My father questioning why Emma was allowed to choose her own clothes, resulting in mismatched outfits. My mother's subtle comments about Emma's curly hair needing a good brushing. Charlotte's sideways glances at the frozen dinners in my freezer. The breaking point came during breakfast on day 9. You really shouldn't let her have sugary cereal, my father said as Emma happily ate her Fruit Loops. We never allowed that with you girls. Something inside me snapped. Dad, you need to stop. This is my home. Emma is my daughter. I decide what she eats, what she wears, and how she lives. Not you. Not Mom. Not Charlotte. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Emma looked up, milk dripping from her spoon. I'm simply trying to help, my father replied stiffly. No, you're trying to control, I corrected. There's a difference. And it stops now, Later that day, things went from bad to worse. I was preparing for a video call with an important client when my phone rang. Before I could answer, my father picked it up from the counter. "Claire Harper's residence," he said formally, then frowned. "No, she doesn't have time for additional projects right now. Her plate is quite full with family obligations." I snatched the phone from his hand, horrified. "Richard? Hi, this is Claire. I'm so sorry about that." I covered the mouthpiece. "Dad, go upstairs. Now." It took 20 minutes of damage control to salvage the relationship with a client who thought I'd authorized someone to screen my calls and reject opportunities. When the call ended, I found my father in the living room, looking offended. "You had no right to answer my phone or speak for me," I said, struggling to keep my voice calm. "That call could have cost me a major account." "I was only trying to protect you from being overworked," he replied. "You're doing too much as it is." "I've been doing too much for 3 years without your help," I reminded him. "I don't need protection. I need respect." The week's tension came to a head at Willow Park, where I'd taken Emma to play on Saturday morning. My parents had insisted on coming along, eager for grandparent time, despite my reservations about moving too quickly. Emma was climbing the jungle gym when a woman approached my mother, her face tight with barely contained anger. "You have some nerve showing your face in public, Marian Harper," she hissed. "After what your family did." My mother paled, while my father stepped forward defensively. Other parents turned to watch the confrontation unfold. "This is a children's playground," the woman continued. "We don't need criminals contaminating the space." Before I could think better of it, I stepped between them. "That's enough. Whatever your issue is with my parents, this isn't the place to address it." The woman's eyes widened. "You're defending them? After the Harper family bankrupted half the town with their investment scam?" "I'm defending my daughter's right to enjoy the park without witnessing adult drama," I replied firmly. "Take it somewhere else." The woman stalked away, but the damage was done. Other parents gathered their children, throwing suspicious glances our way. Emma's playmate was suddenly called home by his mother, leaving my daughter standing confused and alone by the swings. Walking home, Emma's small hand in mine, I wondered why I had instinctively protected the very people who had never protected me. The question haunted me through dinner preparation, until it exploded over roast chicken, ironically, my mother's recipe. "It's so fortunate Emma finally has grandparents in her life," my mother commented, passing the mashed potatoes. "Every child needs family." The casual presumption in her words ignited something deep inside me. "Fortunate?" I repeated, setting down my fork with a clatter. "You think Emma is fortunate that you've decided to acknowledge her existence after 5 years? Claire," my father warned, but I was beyond caring. "Where were you when she had colic and cried for 6 weeks straight? Where were you for her first steps? Her first words? When she had pneumonia at 2 and I sat in the emergency room terrified that I might lose her?" My voice rose with each question. "Where were you for her first day of preschool? Her dance recital? When she asked why other kids had grandmas and grandpas but she didn't?" The table fell silent, my parents and Charlotte frozen in the face of my unleashed grief and anger. "You missed everything," I continued, tears streaming down my face. "Every milestone. Every fever. Every beautiful, ordinary moment. And now you think you can just walk in and claim grandparent status like it's your right?" Emma's small voice broke through my rage. "Mama? Why are you crying?" I turned to see her standing in the doorway, eyes wide and frightened. Before I could respond, Marcus appeared behind her, gently placing his hands on her shoulders. "Hey, princess. Your mom needs a minute. How about we go outside and see if we can spot any fireflies?" He caught my eye over her head, a silent promise to take care of her while I pulled myself together. After they left, I wiped my face with a napkin. "I think we're done for tonight." Surprisingly, it was Charlotte who helped me clear the table while our parents retreated to the guest room. As we loaded the dishwasher in silence, she finally spoke. You've done an amazing job with her, she said quietly. Emma, I mean. She's incredible. Thank you, I replied stiffly. And you've done well for yourself too. She gestured around the kitchen. The house, your career. You built all this by yourself while I was letting Martin handle everything. She laughed bitterly. Look how that turned out. For the first time since their arrival, I really looked at my sister. The perfect Charlotte, always poised and put together, looked exhausted and uncertain. When a client crisis forced me to work late the following night, it was Charlotte who volunteered to help, revealing surprising business acumen as she assisted with spreadsheets and marketing analysis. You're good at this, I commented as we worked side by side. I did graduate with a business degree, she reminded me. Before Dad insisted I take an administrative role at the family company instead of the management track. Apparently, that was reserved for Martin, even though I had better qualifications. The revelation shifted something in our dynamic. We weren't friends, not yet, but perhaps we were finding our way to being sisters again. Meanwhile, Emma's innocent questions became increasingly difficult to answer. Why don't you have pictures of Grandma and Grandpa from when I was a baby? She asked one evening. Did they live far away? I had prepared explanations over the years, but now, with my parents sleeping under my roof, the careful scripts felt hollow. That night, I began writing a letter to Emma, documenting our family history with as much honesty and compassion as I could muster. She deserved the truth someday, but on her terms, not in the middle of this chaotic reunion. The emotional toll of my family's presence led me to seek professional help. At Marcus's suggestion, I booked an appointment with his grief counselor, Dr. Winters. You're grieving the family you wished you had, she observed during our second session. While simultaneously dealing with the actual family showing up on your doorstep. I built my entire life to prove them wrong, I admitted. To show them I could succeed without them. What does it mean if I let them back in? Perhaps the question isn't what it means about them, but what it means about you, she replied gently. Who are you beyond your relationship to their rejection? The question lingered as I helped my father sort his medications one evening. His hand shook slightly as he organized pills into daily compartments. The heart condition, I said, reading label after label for cardiac medications. How long have you had it? About 2 years, he answered, not meeting my eyes. It's manageable with medication. You should have told me when you arrived. He looked up, surprise evident on his face. Would it have mattered? Of course it would, I replied, frustrated. I'm not a monster, Dad. He was silent for a long moment. Claire, I need to say something, and I don't expect you to respond. He set down the pill organizer. What I did to you was unforgivable. I don't expect forgiveness. I just need you to know that I recognize what I did. It wasn't a proper apology, there were no explicit words of remorse, no acknowledgement of the specific pain he'd caused. But it was the first crack in the wall of righteousness he'd built around his actions, and for now, it was enough to acknowledge with a nod before changing the subject. My chosen family was less willing to accept these tentative steps toward reconciliation. Jasmine, in particular, remained fiercely protective. These people threw you out when you needed them most, she reminded me during a tense dinner where I'd invited both families to meet. And now we're supposed to welcome them because they've fallen on hard times? It's complicated, I replied, feeling caught between worlds. No, it's actually very simple, Jasmine countered. They abandoned their pregnant daughter. There's no complexity that justifies that. I found myself in the strange position of defending people I hadn't fully forgiven to people who had earned my complete trust. The contradiction exhausted me. When the 2-week mark of their stay passed without mention of alternative arrangements, I realized I needed to address the situation directly. I found my parents in the guest room, my father reading the newspaper while my mother folded laundry. We need to talk about your plans, I said, leaning against the doorframe. The agreement was 2 weeks. My mother looked startled. But things are going so well with Emma. She's just starting to get comfortable with us. That's not the point, I replied. You need to be actively looking for your own place and contributing financially to this household. I'm not running a charity. My father lowered his newspaper. We've lost everything, Claire. What exactly do you expect us to do? I expect you to do what I did, I answered simply. Start over. Find jobs. Create a new life from scratch. I managed it at 21 with a baby on the way. Surely you can manage it in your 50s with decades of experience. That's different, he argued, color rising in his face. We've lost our reputation, our standing in the community. So did I reminded him. The difference is, I didn't deserve it. I straightened up, squaring my shoulders. You have 1 month to find jobs and start looking for an apartment, or you'll need to make other arrangements. You're enjoying this, aren't you? My father accused as I turned to leave. Getting your revenge. I paused in the doorway. No, Dad. I'm just finally setting the boundaries I should have had all along. Spring turned to summer, bringing changes none of us could have anticipated. While helping my mother organize the few possessions they'd brought from their former home, I discovered a shoebox tucked beneath folded sweaters. Inside were dozens of envelopes, each addressed to Claire Harper in my mother's neat handwriting. None were sealed or stamped. What are these? I asked, holding up a birthday card dated 3 years earlier. My mother's face flushed. You weren't supposed to find those. I opened the card. Inside, beneath generic printed wishes, my mother had written, I wonder what you're doing today. If you're happy. If the baby looks like you did at that age. I'm sorry we failed you. There's one for every birthday, Christmas, and Mother's Day, she explained quietly. And sometimes just because I was thinking about you. I rifled through the envelopes. Why didn't you send them? Your father forbade any contact, she said, then shook her head. No, that's not entirely true. I could have found a way. I was too ashamed, too worried about what people would think. Too weak to stand up to him. She met my eyes directly. I failed you as a mother. The admission was startling in its honesty. For years, I'd lumped my parents together in my mind, equally guilty, equally unforgiving. The letters revealed a more complicated truth. My mother had regretted their decision, even as she lacked the courage to defy it. A week later, another revelation came from an unexpected source. My father's notebook fell from his coat pocket as he returned from a doctor's appointment. As I picked it up, it fell open to a page of handwritten text. Another night without sleep. Saw a young woman with a stroller at the park today who reminded me of how Claire might look now. The grandchild I've never met would be walking, talking. I built my life on certainty, on moral absolutes. Now I'm not certain of anything except that I was wrong. How do you apologize for destroying your child's life? I quickly closed the notebook, feeling like an intruder. The private anguish it contained didn't erase the pain my father had caused, but it complicated my understanding of him. The proud, rigid man who had thrown me out was also capable of doubt, regret, and sleepless nights. That summer brought professional recognition as I received the Regional Marketing Association's Young Innovator Award. The ceremony fell on a Thursday evening, requiring childcare arrangements. We could watch Emma, Charlotte suggested. If you trust us. It was a big step, but a necessary one. That evening, dressed in a blue sheath dress I'd splurged on for the occasion, I looked out from the podium to see my family, both chosen and biological, sitting together in the audience. Jasmine and Marcus had insisted on coming, positioning themselves protectively on either side of my parents and Charlotte. Success doesn't happen in isolation, I said during my acceptance speech. We all need support systems. Some of us are fortunate enough to find them in unexpected places when traditional ones fail. I made brief eye contact with Jasmine and Marcus. And sometimes, we discover that relationships we thought were permanently broken can be rebuilt, albeit differently than before. My father's eyes glistened with unshed tears, while my mother smiled tremulously. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was acknowledgement of their presence in my life now, even if they had been absent when I needed them most. Charlotte's transformation was perhaps the most surprising. After countless resume rejections due to her association with the scandal, she enrolled in online business courses. "I'm thinking of starting a small business," she confided one evening as we sat on my back porch, watching Emma chase fireflies in the yard. "Something to help women in difficult situations become financially independent." "What inspired that?" I asked, curious. "You did," she answered simply. "Watching how you built everything from nothing. There must be so many women out there who need the kind of support you never got." For the first time since our childhood, I felt genuinely connected to my sister. We weren't competing anymore, we were collaborating, Charlotte's business education complementing my real-world experience. The most unexpected development involved my father and Emma. I came home from work one afternoon to find them hunched over a chessboard in the living room, my father patiently explaining the movement of each piece. "This was your mom's favorite game when she was little," he told Emma, unaware I was listening from the hallway. "She was very good at it. Beat me for the first time when she was only 7. "Were you mad?" Emma asked, moving a pawn cautiously. "No," my father replied, smiling at the memory. "I was proud. It's good to be beaten sometimes. Keeps you humble." I leaned against the wall, processing the disconnect between this gentle grandfather and the man who had thrown me out with 2 suitcases and $200. People could change, it seemed, though I remained wary of how permanent those changes might be. Our fragile new dynamic faced its first serious test when my mother discovered a lump in her breast. She came to me first, terror in her eyes. "I don't have insurance," she whispered. "I don't know what to do." Despite our complicated history, her fear struck a chord of basic human compassion. I called in favors at the community health center where Emma received her checkups, securing an appointment for the following day. "You'll come with me?" she asked, sounding vulnerable in a way I'd never heard before. "Of course," I promised. Sitting beside her in the sterile exam room, holding her hand as the doctor performed the biopsy, I experienced an odd role reversal. For the first time, I was the protector rather than the one needing protection. The results came back benign, triggering tears of relief from both of us. "I thought it might be karma," my mother admitted afterward. "Punishment for how I treated you." "That's not how the world works, Mom," I replied. "Bad things happen to good people, and good things happen to people who've made mistakes. There's no cosmic scorecard." The conversation opened a door to more honest communication. During one late-night kitchen discussion, legal documents arrived that revealed the full extent of my family's financial collapse. Reviewing them, I discovered something startling: the business had been failing for years before my pregnancy, teetering on the edge of insolvency even as my parents maintained their comfortable lifestyle and community standing. "You were already in financial trouble when I told you I was pregnant," I said, looking up from the papers. "That's why you reacted so strongly." My father nodded reluctantly. "We could barely keep the business afloat. Another dependent would have." He trailed off, unable to finish. "So it wasn't just moral outrage," I concluded. "It was financial panic disguised as moral outrage." "Both," my mother admitted. "The pregnancy gave us a reason that would preserve our reputation in the community. Better to be seen as strict parents upholding traditional values than as failures who couldn't provide for their family." The revelation didn't excuse their actions, but it provided context I'd never had before. Their rejection hadn't been solely about me or my pregnancy, it had been the desperate flailing of people watching their carefully constructed world crumble. Summer turned to fall, and with it came changes. I helped my parents create resumes and apply for jobs they would have considered beneath them a year earlier. My father secured a position as a night manager at a hotel, while my mother found part-time work at a florist shop. Their combined income wasn't much, but it was enough to begin saving for their own place. "We found an apartment," my mother announced one evening in October. "It's small, just 1 bedroom, but the rent is manageable." I felt an unexpected twinge of emotion. After 5 months of navigating this complex reconnection, they would be leaving my daily life, not banished this time, but moving forward toward independence. The day they signed their lease, my mother broke down in tears. "I never properly thanked you," she said, clutching the apartment keys. "Not just for taking us in, but for showing us who you've become despite us, not because of us." Before they moved out, I called a family meeting, including Marcus and Jasmine. Sitting around my dining table, I laid out my expectations for our relationship moving forward. "Emma will have relationships with all her grandparents, biological and chosen," I began, looking around the table. "But trust has to be rebuilt gradually, with actions, not just words." My father nodded soberly. "We understand. There will be no disparaging comments about anyone in this extended family," I continued. "We all bring value to Emma's life in different ways." Jasmine and my mother exchanged cautious glances, neither entirely comfortable with the other's role but both willing to try for Emma's sake. Most importantly, I concluded, we move forward with honesty. No more secrets, no more pretending the past didn't happen. We acknowledge it, learn from it, and choose to build something better. As my parents packed their few belongings for the move to their apartment, I found myself helping my mother wrap a framed photograph of Emma that she'd kept on her nightstand. "She has your smile," my mother observed, tracing the glass with her fingertip. "And your stubbornness," I replied with a small smile. It wasn't forgiveness, not completely. But it was a beginning. 3 years later. "Grandma, did you see me? Did you see?" 8-year-old Emma tugged excitedly at my mother's sleeve as the elementary school auditorium filled with applause. I remembered all my lines. "You were wonderful, sweetheart," my mother beamed, adjusting the flower crown that had slipped askew on Emma's head. "The perfect fairy queen." I watched from a few steps away as Emma basked in her grandmother's praise. Behind them, my father chatted amicably with Marcus, while Charlotte helped Sam adjust his bow tie. Jasmine wrangled her daughter Lily, now a spirited 5-year-old, preventing her from climbing over the auditorium seats. It had taken 3 years to reach this point, where my biological family and chosen family could occupy the same space with genuine warmth rather than strained politeness. The path hadn't been linear or easy, but watching them all gathered together to support Emma felt like a small miracle. "Great job wrangling 23rd graders into a coherent performance," Marcus said, slipping his arm around my waist as we moved toward the exit. "Ready for dinner? My mom's holding our reservation." The restaurant buzzed with post-recital energy as families celebrated their young performers. Our large table accommodated my parents, Charlotte, Marcus and his son, Jasmine and Lily, and the guests of honor, Emma and her fellow fairy, her best friend Zoe. The easy conversation, punctuated by laughter and the clinking of glasses, would have been unimaginable 3 years earlier. The changes in those years had been significant. Charlotte and I had launched a small foundation providing grants to single parents pursuing education or entrepreneurship. The Harper Wilson Foundation, named with both our maiden and married names, as I'd become Mrs. Wilson just 6 months earlier, had already helped 15 women secure better futures for themselves and their children. At the foundation's opening event, Charlotte had publicly acknowledged her journey from judgment to understanding. "My sister taught me that family isn't about conforming to expectations," she'd said, raising her glass toward me. "It's about supporting each other, especially when the path looks different than you imagined." My father's health had stabilized with proper medication and regular doctor visits, though his heart condition remained chronic. During his recovery from a minor procedure, Emma had visited him daily, bringing her favorite books to read aloud at his bedside. I'd overheard him tell her one afternoon, "Your mother is the strongest person I've ever known. Remember that." The validation I'd once desperately craved now felt like a pleasant affirmation rather than a necessary lifeline. I'd built my sense of self without his approval, receiving it now was a bonus, not a requirement. My wedding to Marcus had been a blending of worlds, my father walking me down the aisle alongside Vivian, my first boss and mentor. My mother and Jasmine had collaborated on the flowers, finding common ground in their shared artistic sensibilities. Emma and Sam had proudly served as flower girl and ring bearer, already comfortable in their new roles as siblings. "Are you happy, Claire?" my mother had asked at the reception, catching a quiet moment between dances. Yes, I'd answered honestly. Not because everything's perfect, but because I've learned to find joy in the imperfect. Now, watching Emma demonstrate her fairy dance moves for my father at the restaurant table, I felt that same contentment. Our family photographs had expanded to include multiple generations and relationships that defied simple categorization. The annual family portrait now required a wide-angle lens and careful arrangement to fit everyone in the frame. As dessert was served, Emma suddenly asked a question that silenced the table. Why weren't Grandma and Grandpa in my baby pictures? I caught my father's eye across the table. We'd known this moment would come eventually, despite our careful explanations over the years. Emma was growing more perceptive, more attuned to the subtle dynamics around her. Let's talk about that tomorrow, I suggested gently. Tonight is for celebrating your performance. But Emma, with the persistence of an 8-year-old, pressed on. But Lily has pictures with her grandparents when she was a baby. And so does Sam with his grandma. Why don't I have any with you? She looked directly at my parents. My father set down his fork. That's a fair question, Emma. He glanced at me, silently asking permission. When I nodded, he continued, sometimes adults make mistakes. Big mistakes. Your grandma and I made a very big mistake when your mom told us she was going to have you. What kind of mistake? Emma asked, her brow furrowed. We didn't understand what a blessing you would be, my mother interjected softly. We were worried about the wrong things, and we hurt your mom very much. We weren't there when we should have been, my father added. And we missed seeing you as a baby, which makes us very sad. Emma considered this with the straightforward logic of childhood. But you're here now. Yes, I confirmed, reaching for her hand across the table. They are. Because people can make mistakes, even terrible ones, and still learn and change and try to do better. Is that why we have so many grandparents? Emma asked. Because some were missing and others filled in? Exactly, Marcus said, smoothing her hair. Family is complicated and wonderful that way. Later that night, tucking Emma into bed, I was surprised when she asked, Are you still mad at Grandma and Grandpa for their mistake? I sat on the edge of her bed, considering how to answer truthfully but appropriately. Sometimes I still feel sad about what happened, I admitted. But I'm not angry the way I used to be. I've learned that holding on to anger hurts me more than it hurts anyone else. Like when I was mad at Zoe for breaking my bracelet? Emma suggested. Similar, but bigger, I smiled. The important thing is that we all love you very much, even if we sometimes disagree or make mistakes. The following Sunday brought unexpected news. After examining a persistent cough, my father's doctor scheduled him for heart surgery, a more significant procedure than his previous treatments. It's routine, he insisted, though the worry lines around my mother's eyes suggested otherwise. During his recovery, Emma developed a ritual of visiting her grandfather daily, bringing her school books to read aloud while he rested. My father, once so formidable and unyielding, now listened with rapt attention to her stories and observations. She's extraordinary, he told me one afternoon as Emma stepped out with my mother to find a snack. Not just because she's smart or kind, though she is both. But because she's so completely herself, so confident in who she is. He reached for my hand. That's your doing, Claire. You gave her what we never gave you, the freedom to be exactly who she is. When Marcus proposed expanding our family, I found myself considering options I would have automatically declined years earlier. The marketing director position at Harper Wilson Foundation required occasional travel, sessions I had previously arranged around Emma's schedule with Marcus's help. We could help with Emma when you travel, my mother offered hesitantly. If you'd be comfortable with that. The suggestion would have been unthinkable 3 years earlier. Now, it felt like a natural evolution of our healing relationship. I'd like that, I replied, surprised to discover I meant it. The ultimate test of our reconciliation came unexpectedly one spring morning, when a home pregnancy test confirmed what I'd been suspecting for weeks. Unlike my first pregnancy announcement made in fear and isolation, I shared this news surrounded by family, all variations of family, during Sunday dinner. "We're having a baby," Marcus announced, his arm around my shoulders. The table erupted in celebration, Charlotte hugging me fiercely, Jasmine already offering baby equipment she'd saved, Emma and Sam speculating excitedly about whether they'd have a brother or sister. Through the commotion, I noticed my mother's silent tears. When our eyes met across the table, she mouthed 2 words, "Thank you." Later, as she helped clear dishes, she asked hesitantly, "Would it be possible, would you consider letting me be present for the birth?" "I understand if that's too much." The request represented how profoundly our relationship had transformed, from rejection to tentative reconnection to something approaching true family bonds. After a moment's reflection, I nodded. "I'd like you to be there." In the nursery of our new home, Emma helped me arrange stuffed animals while my father assembled a crib nearby. My mother unpacked a small wooden cradle, newly refinished. "This was yours," she explained, running her hand over the smooth wood. "And mine before that. I kept it all these years, hoping someday." As she trailed off, I understood what remained unspoken. She had kept the cradle as an act of hope during years of estrangement, believing that someday, somehow, our broken family might find its way back together. Standing in that sunlit room, surrounded by evidence of both past wounds and present healing, I placed my hands on my growing belly. The child within would be born into a family that had learned its hardest lessons the painful way, that love isn't about perfection but persistence, that family isn't defined by unwavering support but by the courage to rebuild after devastating breaks. There was no neat ending to our story, no moment when the past was completely resolved or forgiven. Instead, there was the daily work of reconciliation, the ongoing choice to acknowledge both what was lost and what could still be found. We were writing a new family narrative together, one that included accountability for past failures alongside hope for what still lay ahead. As Emma arranged the mobile above the crib, sunlight catching the delicate glass birds, she asked, "Will the new baby have as many people to love them as I do?" "Yes," I answered, watching my father carefully adjust the crib railing and my mother smooth the blankets with reverent hands. "Maybe even more." "Could you forgive the people who abandoned you at your lowest moment, if you saw them at theirs?" The hardest bridges to rebuild are the ones others burned, but sometimes, the strongest families rise from the ashes of what was lost. If this story touched you, hit like and subscribe for more tales of broken bonds and unexpected healing.